This special meeting of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 6 p.m. I am pleased that you've taken time to join us this evening. I'm sorry? 5:30? Did I say the wrong time?
Yes.
You said 6 p.m.
You know, I'm not even tired. For the record, 5:30. Thank you, Betty Holmes, for clarifying. So for the record, it is 5:30 p.m. In compliance with the State Government Code on Open Meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted, and we will establish a quorum. Okay, please mark yourself present. Okay. We do have a quorum, board members present, all 7, and Dr. Fields with administration.
Good evening.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Okay, no public comment. So what I'd like to do is, for the sake of getting into our agenda, kind of address some of the things. So I'm going to rearrange the order so that we can move through things. So we do have an action item on this agenda that is actually in part because at the end of our previous meeting, we had a very tired board, all of us were, and so we kind of sped through it. So I want to have a bigger, broader discussion on this and just revisit that for the sake of our community. And then, of course, after that, I'd like to go into closed session to discuss the 2 closed session items we have. Let's start. It's number 4, consider an active action item. Discussion and possible action regarding the approval of new positions for 24-25 fiscal year, recommended by the Moss Adams Staffing and TASB System Audit. Dr. Fields?
Yes, sir. In the closed session last week, we had a discussion with we wanted to bring back the actual positions. We wanted to cover the new positions, not necessarily the reclassified positions. If we could talk about that maybe at a later date, we will put it on the agenda again. But there are only 5 positions for new that we wanted to discuss. The first of which is the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services. It was recommended by Moss Adams to come back and have a person who was, one of the concerns is that currently we have a deputy superintendent who oversees quite a bit in teaching and learning and oversees principals. And then we have an assistant superintendent who oversees quite a bit in curriculum and instruction and oversees the principals as well. And it was recommended that we have another individual who take on some of those responsibilities. We'll talk about the 3 area directors, but that an assistant superintendent come up and take on special ed and some of the specific responsibilities assigned to the deputy superintendent, so the deputy superintendent could then give oversight for more of what happens in teaching and learning. That would be the assistant superintendent role. Then the area directors were one where Moss Adams did the survey and looked at like districts to ours and recommended that rather than having 2 individuals with their own levels of responsibility to take on the supervision of the principals, that we have area directors that maybe 10 principals could report to each 3 of them. And their recommendation was that we take an existing director position and convert it to one of the area directors and then create 2 more. That would be about $245,000. The addition of, and this is with benefits, and then the addition of the assistant superintendent would be $150,000. One of the other things that the board put as a priority for us was the creation of a coordinator and compensation classification position because of the inconsistencies that had happened with the hiring of personnel, and having one person to watch that as people were hired would be more efficient. So the positions that we're asking for was the assistant superintendent position, the 3 area directors, and the creation of the coordinator and compensation. We stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
What is the cost for the coordinator?
The coordinator would be a little different. There was also a recommendation that we decrease in our payroll department. So if we were to take 2 positions in that area and then convert one of them to this coordinator position, then it would be half. It would be about 40,000.
And all these are directly from the internal audit and TASB audit in terms of recommendations?
Yes, sir.
I'll open it up to questions first. So if you hit your button, I'll recognize you. Okay, Ms. Stanford.
I like that idea that you just mentioned about payroll into the coordinator. Anything we can do to pull from the organizational tree, maybe cross-pull, short of opening up brand-new admin positions. I'm a little concerned about the optics of that when we're dealing with a 33 plus or minus $1 million budget deficit, and then adding these positions. So I'm just wondering if this is the time to do that. So
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
my initial comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ryan?
I already talked to Dr. Fields about this, but my concern with adding another, this totals up to $507,000 to our line 41 general fund. I get the argument that our peer districts must be organized this way because that's what the staffing audit said. But I also know what do our peer districts not have then? Because when I pull up these 5 peers, and I think I've mentioned this in another meeting, their expenditures on their district staff are somewhere between 2.5 to the highest I could find was 2.9. But most of them are in the 2.5, 2.57, 2.6% of their budget is what they spend on their line 41 admin budget. We are over 3.3%, and that's without adding these positions. To the tune of, percentage-wise, we spend $2 million more than these 5 peer districts do on this line of the budget. So I'm not satisfied with adding more positions without figuring out where is the trade-off, because if we're looking to reduce and get in line with them, then there should be at least $500,000, if not $2.5 million worth of positions that could be somehow realigned and efficiencies made, just so that we are in line with our spending with the peer districts also, because they may have these positions, but it means there's a lot of other positions that they don't have that we have in our budget. So I'm looking to get us in line budgetarily with other districts that are our peers.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms. Eaton, you said you had a question. Go ahead, Ms. Eaton. You have the floor.
When you say in line,
Is your mic on?
On top. There you go.
Ms. Ryan, when you say to get in line with our peer districts, what are their salaries, though, compared to ours? Remember we talked about that
It's
last time?
interesting that most of their compensations for their district staff are actually higher than ours. If I go look at the midpoints of Midland and Pflugerville, they pay their people even better than we pay them. So again, I get very confused then so they're higher paid, but they're spending less money than we are percentage-wise. So that means they not only have less people, they have like way less people, because the people they do have are being compensated better than our people. So we have a lot of mid-paid people, and they have a few very high-paid people, is what the numbers show. So they pay their assistant superintendents like way more than we do.
Well, I'd like to add to the conversation that I know that this did not originate from our administration. This was a direct result of our internal audit and TASB audit that we requested. The coordinator on compensation, is going to help address some of the issues that we've had with our compensation. I guess, right, the person is going to be ultra-focused on that so that we kind of get ahead of any future challenges in that area. So I do see the benefit of that position. I also see the benefit of the principals, the directors, because one thing I will tell you in my visits is always that principals would like more support. And I know that Dr. Duhart-Toppin and Dr. Saunders are spread quite thin in their responsibilities. So if this helps principals get that added support, then I'm okay with at least evaluating it on the front end. Again, I have some sensitivity about creating another layer of bureaucracy without a return on investment. So I would ask Dr. Fields that you really evaluate this, because just like anything, principal retention will now be sort of paramount. Principals will have to fill out their surveys to say we feel supported and all of those things. But I would ask then that, for me to feel comfortable with that, I guess to Ms. Ryan's point, if there is some discrepancies in terms of salaries, and we're still exploring that, maybe we hold off on the assistant sup position for the time being, and we just approve your 3 directors and the coordinator of compensation for right now. And then, of course, we can revisit the assistant sup if you're comfortable with that. But just wanted to kind of get your feedback on that as well.
Understood. Were there any other?
Well, yes, I have Ms. Hold on, let me hit my button, sorry. Ms. Faulkner?
Yes, ma'am.
So to piggyback on what he said,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
we do, as a board, approve all of these positions, I guess what we're going to have to do is task the cabinet with a way to measure the effectiveness of whether or not, and coming up with a tool to measure the effectiveness of these positions, since we are in a budget deficit right at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
Ms. Eaton?
Okay, last year, around this time, when we were discussing this, one of the things that I recall us putting a lot of emphasis on to the staff was creating that pipeline for promotion within. And we talked about the fact that we have 2 cabinet members that have 32 schools, principals split between the 2 of them, that they are running around trying to do and take care of the job that they do up here. And so we talked about it. I don't know that this was the title that we used for the position, but we talked about this as far back as a year ago, about creating someone, a way to have someone to coach, mentor, and teach the principals. And that was one of the things that you all were tasked with. And so I agree. We are having a problem with our budget, and we have to bring that into alignment. But, you know, we also have to keep in mind that if we're going to grow from within, we have to be able to coach, teach, and mentor the principals that we have and take some of the stress off of not only the principals, but our cabinet members that have 32 principals split between them as well as their job.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. Ms. Knoyer?
Thank you. I know that one of the areas that I have, and my colleagues have expressed before, is special education.
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that Dr. Duhart-Toppin oversees special education right now, along with 8 million other things. While I don't like creating lots of new positions and spending money, I don't like that our students are not getting the services they need because we don't have the ability to truly oversee everything that's happening and everything that's going on. We're seeing a huge increase in the number of students who are identified with special needs, and we have to make sure that we're following the care and consideration that not only the law, but our hearts dictate that they are provided. Because this new superintendent position would be overseeing that, as well as counseling, am I correct? And
Yes, ma'am.
our truancy and all those kinds of things. Those are all issues that we have called out over and over again when we're looking at the details and the reports and those kinds of things. So if we want that to improve, we sometimes have to give money to it. And so I would support that at this time. Bring somebody in, let's get in there, let's get that streamlined, let's get people having an appropriate workload for what they're being paid. As you said, other people in those positions are getting a whole lot more money, and they may not be having the same type of workload. Let's be fair. I'm okay with these 5 positions moving forward now.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ryan?
At what point are we going to discuss, I guess, the rest of the changes? I mean, it's been a week now, so I'm assuming conversations have occurred, with some of the other changes. And what about the campus changes that don't affect a specific person that, when are we going to talk about that? Like, why are we doing this and not talking about what we're changing on the campuses?
The changes you're asking are ones that we were going to discuss in the last board meeting. We didn't get to. It's not on the agenda for us then to now go back and say, this was the TASB recommendation. Because you heard Nicole in the TASB presentation say that she put together, 0.5 and 1%. We didn't get to that. We didn't get to all of the other, how did she refer to them? Adjustments. So
Okay.
rather than
I think
try and
some of us
tackle.
were confused on what we approved. That's why I didn't see a list of what we approved came out. I thought the 2 major campus adjustments
What we're
were what
doing
we
is-
voted on.
What we're doing is
Maybe we
trying to
didn't.
come back and be specific on what was approved and what was not, the first of which would be these 5 positions. Then we'll come back with the adjustments or reclassifications outlined that we'll discuss. In addition, we will discuss the general pay increase of a
Yeah.
0.5% or
Yeah, no,
whatever
I know we
you
didn't
decide
get
to go for.
We didn't get to pay. It was too late at night.
Right, right.
to do
So
that.
we're asking that we move forward with that at a later date. We just wanted to talk about these because there's conversations that would need to be had.
Yeah, and I will echo too that we did not finish our conversation regarding that, so there's still more to discuss on it. Ms. Eaton?
I just wanted to say one more thing on that. As Ms. Canoia alluded to, with the special needs program, we all know from all the paperwork and all the things that are coming down the pipe that we're getting kids that we probably wouldn't get because charter schools will not take them. Any hint of a disciplinary problem or, anything that those kids do wrong or they are not prepared to do, can't read, can't write, whatever, they don't have to keep them. And that is what has driven up our number in that area. And so our staff does need that additional help because of those students. And I mean, we can't turn students away. We don't want to turn students away. We want more. But we just want to be fair, too. We want to be able to give quality education to all of our students. Thank you.
Ms. Stanford? I'm sorry, hold on.
Wrong?
It's Ms. Rodriguez.
Excuse me. So I see each of these positions as being kind of like what Ms. Eaton said, like directly aligned to increasing our student outcomes and our student learning by adding capacity. It's not lost on me the optics of, like increasing the size of our central office staff. And I think that from what we've heard in the program reviews, excuse me, there's just a general orientation towards finding those efficiencies. And so, we're not saying here that we're going to cut positions, but there may be some positions that if they become vacant, we can find savings there and things like that. So I would approve these. And a clarifying question that I have is, none of these would be posted until the budget for next school year is approved, correct, right? Because these aren't things that exist in our current budget. these are things that, or we couldn't hire, I guess, the start date couldn't be until our new budget is
You're
approved,
absolutely
correct?
correct.
Okay.
We would post, but we wouldn't hire.
Yeah.
It would be a hire for next year.
Okay.
But if we post now, we can see if there's interest
Right.
to see.
And I imagine too that some of the candidates may be folks who are working in, principal positions and things like that. So that would also give people a chance to close out the school year, wind that down, and then
Correct.
step into a new position. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Stanford?
Have we had any more clarity on the drop in students? How many we think we've lost, and do we have any idea of where we lost them? The drop in student attendance?
We've gone through it. I can allow Dr. Gosh to go through it again. Dr.
Well,
Gosh, we want to go through
I
it.
was going to say, Dr. Fields, it's not specifically on the agenda for the 5 positions.
Right, I was just asking if we'd had any more
So-
clarity.
I think she's pretty clear on exactly how we went through the reduction in students from last year to this year.
Well,
See, I don't think he wants you to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not on the agenda. This is about the 5 positions and
It's
not
just
the.
part
enrollment.
of supporting that, because that's just part of the picture in my mind, that we're having a reduction in student body and increasing admin, and I want you two to get all the help you can get too. Just concerned about that, balancing that, and if there's any way to maybe negotiate some of these things, like you mentioned, the payroll position, maybe negotiating that instead of just a brand-new coordinator.
That's definitely something that we could do for the coordinator position. We would use the, one of the payrolls, and again, that would be a 40,000. And then, but the other ones would be about 245, the 2 positions, and then the assistant superintendent would be about 150. This is all with benefits. This isn't
Right.
just their salary.
And I do apologize, Ms. Stafford, I see your point, just in terms of this in relation to
Correct.
that impact. Okay, but that's general enough, I understand.
I
So-
did want to respond to 2 things that came up, though.
Sure.
To the statement of measurement, you're absolutely correct. We could do a survey. We could come up with some way to measure the return on investment. And we could even make that clear in a hire as we went in, that this is what we would like to see in the position at the end. And we can always look for efficiencies to lessen the blow of some of the positions. And it's not lost on us either that we're asking for an increase in this area. But what we've determined as a senior staff is that you can't monitor everything that there is to monitor in special education, pay attention to secondary curriculum and elementary curriculum and the counselors and everything else on a daily basis, and then be out at the campuses to walk a principal through something that may be happening at their campus right now. This is definitely something we feel like is important, or we would have never even brought it to the board.
Well, in order to keep us on time, are there any final questions so we can bring this up? I want to make sure we hear from everyone if there's anything. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to approval of the new positions for the 24-25 fiscal year as recommended by Moss Adams Staffing and TASB Pay System Audit.
Second.
Okay, motion was made, Suzanne Knoller, second. Let's go ahead and proceed to vote, please. Okay, motion passes 5-2. So the motion is carried, Dr. Fields. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and try to take care of our closed session items. So we're going to go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074 and 551071, discussion regarding board member duties, roles, and responsibilities, and pursuant to Texas Government Code 551074 and 551071, consider and discuss the superintendent's duties, roles, and responsibilities. So the time is now 5:55. We're going into closed session.
We don't have the whiteboards and the sheets of paper and all that stuff.
The board will now reconvene in open session. The time is now, what time is it? 6:49 PM. No final action, decision, or vote was taken while the board was in closed session. We can go ahead and proceed with the main show, which is, of course, to hold a team of 8 and evaluating and improving student outcomes training with Moat Casey. So, Dr. Greg Gibson, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll do a mic check. Does that work? Check, test, 1, 2, test. Am I getting a thumbs up back here?
I can give you this one.
Testing. Okay. I think the first time I was here, I wasn't doing a good job with the little push button thing, so this is wise. He's hard. Just to clarify, here in a little bit, we're going to be able to project the draft on the screen, is that right? Yes. Okay. That's what I thought we decided, and that's good. So Mr. President, with your permission, I was thinking 8:30 when we were originally starting at 5:30, and I'm still going to try to target that. Is everybody good with that? So that's hard for a kid that grew up in West Texas. I'm going to have to I'm going to tighten my words up, and I'm going to proceed pretty quickly. And whenever we finish is when we finish, and when y'all feel right about that. But I'm going to go at a pretty quick pace, and then if someone will just interrupt me if you have a question. Is that fair enough? And I'm just going to kind of I'm going to click along pretty quickly.
Sure.
Okay. So there's an agenda and then a few handouts that you have already seen. 2 of the 3 handouts. You've seen the aligned arrows, and you've seen the 3 essential roles. I hope that I'm invited back again and maybe again. So during this process, and every time that I come, I will be bringing these gifts to you every single time. Because this work anchors on this concept of 3 essential roles and getting clarity around that, and then being systematic and aligning the subsystems. Tonight, in just a moment, I want to dig a little bit deeper on the aligning the subsystems. Last time we just broadly touched on these stages and talked about the arrows. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to actually project the draft of the scorecard. It is a rough draft. It is literally, I left after 3 hours. I don't know how many more hours. They just kept on. Okay, that's what I thought. Is at least another 3, and you'll see evidence of that. I glanced at it earlier, the email. Thank you, and it has really, really good bones. Yes, sir. And there's just I can tell there was just like a stopping point, and then we've got some things like where does this fit, and when you're thinking about a systems perspective, that's key. It's like where does this fit? Where does this fit? I would hope that if we do this right in the future, in this very room, that question is, where does this fit, in our strategic objectives? That was a good conversation. Where does this fit? So that's where we're going to go, and we're going to get some feedback from the board. And then I'll just check in with the superintendent and the board president at that point about the team trust analysis. I'll talk to it, but the cabinet definitely could leave at that point. So on the agenda, and I'm in order for me not to bird walk and to get us on a good pace here, I'm gonna really focus on the words that are on number 2 on the agenda. And so when you hear a lot of times that we want to run the district or the organization like a system, a good system. Okay, that's an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. So easy say, hard do. And you almost have to back up for a little bit and put a pin in some current things that may be happening to the extent that you can. But you can't stop school, that airplane is in the air. So like we're retooling the plane in the air. But I think I told y'all, I'm pretty sure I told you that my dad was a school board president when I became a superintendent. Okay, so I had that experience. And I don't think I shared with you, but the retired fire chief from Oakland, California, had just moved back to Graham, Texas, where he grew up as a boy during his retirement. So this is the fire chief of Oakland, California, who I'm sitting at Rotary at Graham, next to. He's retired, but like it's still like the fire chief for 25 years in Oakland, California. And I got to know him, and he's a great guy. I don't know, fourth time we were at Rotary together, we were chit-chatting. He said, hey, when this is over, do you have a second? I want to talk to you. Immediately superintendent brain kicked in. It's like, oh no, what does the fire department want? I'm just telling you, like that was initial thought. It wasn't that at all. So I chit-chatted and everyone left, and he said, I'm watching you, and as someone that was a leader for 25 years, I like what I see. And you didn't ask me for any advice, but I'm going to give you some advice anyway. So this is all unsolicited. But he said, when I first became fire chief, he said, you were promoted from within. And so when that happens, oftentimes like you get those promotions because you're the best at the job that you're doing right then. And so it's like, let's find another job, and then let's find another job, and then let's find another job. And you just keep moving up the food chain. And that is what happened to me in Graham. And he said, now there's not another job here. Like you're there, you're in the superintendent's position. And he said, I want to use a story that I had to learn when I would go to a big fire in Oakland, if I would, as captain or then eventually as chief. And he said, someone would drive me to the fire. Here's this huge fire going on. I would take a glance at it, and then they had a tent fixed for me to turn my back to the fire so that I could work the fire. He said, you cannot stare at the fire and be in charge of putting out the fire. And, when I was like, what is he? I'm not going to stop staring at the fire. What he was saying is you have no objectivity. You cannot help but being subjective if you're staring at the issue. So he had captains bringing him information, turned his back to the fire, and they're bringing him information, and he's responding to what his people are saying in the field. So, because if I'm staring at it, I might say, go do this, but I might not know what's back behind that, right, while I'm staring at it. But when the captain comes and gives me information, then, okay, do this. Yes, sir, that's right, thank you. Okay, it was the hardest thing on earth for me to think about. Occasionally, if not regularly, I had to stop staring at the fire in order to be in charge of the thing, because I needed to maintain objectivity, and lose the subjectivity. Said that backwards. So the Kaplan and Norton scorecard was the tool that Harvard Business School in the 1990s, I think, was trying to get at related to that. They went back a step, and it was based on Edward Deming, who, the father of quality or the grandfather of quality. And, Edward Deming, and it's the second thing, Roman numeral 2 under 2A. In the systems approach, 90% of our issues are systems issues. But we blame people almost 100% of the time. I have a superintendent friend the other day that's been in a district for 10 years, and he was saying this teacher, has 20 years of first-year experience. Have you all ever heard that term? Okay, I've heard that term too. And I was like, dude, stop saying that. 10 of those years are on you. Right? You can say that about 10 of those years. He was like, ooh, I hadn't thought about that. I was like, yeah, 10 of those years are under your watch. Peter Singy took that a little bit further, and he said every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results that it's achieving. Now that one stings even more, because if you don't, most people don't like the results that they're getting. But if you're in the leadership role, you run the system that is getting those results, and so you can't like blame it on others. It's like we have to. And what Singy did by saying that is that it didn't just happen. If you're in charge of it, then it is by design, because you're in charge of it. This process is trying to say, everybody stop, turn your back to the fire, set all sharp and blunt instruments down. What are we trying to get accomplished? How are we going to know if it's getting done along the way? And how are we going to know that it got done at the end? That's what this is all about. If we do it right, it's simplifying, not making work more complex. It should be making it simpler. This job is never simple. This work, the school system, is because it's people business. But we've got to narrow focus, narrow focus, narrow focus. So I want to talk about 3 different things here, and the final one gets us to the tool, the scorecard, and that's what we're going to project in just a second. So there's at least, I just kept adding mindsets to this as I was thinking about this, you guys, over the weekend. But you have to have a continuous improvement mindset, that anything that we put as a strategic action or a measure is just, it's only that for that moment. It might be subject to change because we learned something. We didn't know what we didn't know. Now we know what we don't know, so now we're tweaking it. That's why we encourage the board to adopt only the objectives, not the actions. Because we want this central administration team, senior leader team, to constantly be working on the actions. This is all based on plan, do, check, act. You plan the work, you do the work, you check on it, you act, and then you do it again. And then you plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act, plan. So these are cycles of improvement over time. This is not, this is the short game. This is trying to get 2.5 yards of carry, 3 yards of carry, not the long bomb. Although you might get a long bomb every now and then in this, this is not designed that way. It is based on Kaizen, a Japanese term, 1/10 of 1% of improvement every single day. 1/10 of 1% every day. And you can have the best school district in the state. But we've got to, we can't know if we've improved or not if these 2 teams, I'm going to call it 2 teams here because we have the strategic team and the tactical team sitting here together. If we don't have a shared definition of success, then we don't know if we're successful or if we're not, because we don't have a shared definition. So mindset number 1, continuous improvement. Mindset number 2, systems approach. Already talked about that. Mindset number 3 on the agenda, reminder. It's just these 3 essential roles. This is a team of 8 up here at the top. And then I think in y'all's case, it's a team of 8 in the tactical role, if you say that the cabinet is the upper tactical role. The superintendent is the only position in the district that's in both of those roles. So these 2 teams combined, I would argue, are the team of 15. It's right here. Like this is the team of 15, right around the table right now. We are seeking harmony and synchronicity and performance between these 2 teams. But we have to have shared definition of what success is, or we never know if we got there. One of our colleagues at the company that I work for now is fond of saying the unspoken request can never be met. Well, that seems kind of like duh, but then you start thinking about that. If I'm a trustee and I've got this notion in my head of the way it should be done, but it isn't in writing anywhere, I can't really be upset if it isn't done the way that the board had adopted the objective. All right, that's mindset number 3. Mindset number 4 are the aligned arrows. So we are seeking alignment of campuses, departments, cabinet members, board members. These are all the thought bubbles I have over my head right now of what these arrows could represent. Does that make sense? And someone, be brave, board members, like, what do you think of when you think about those arrows? Is it your fellow trustees, or is it campuses, departments? Like, what do you think of when you think of those arrows? It's not a rhetorical question. I'm just curious.
It's everybody,
Every employee.
Every little system has to go through that. So if the system is the board, or if the system is the cabinet, or if the system is a campus.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm usually the.
Yeah.
So everybody is a part of looking at this.
So
And where
every-
is each of those groups then?
Right, so that's great. So like anything that can be characterized as a
Yeah.
subsystem, that's what an arrow is. Okay, very good. Any thoughts related to that? I want to add this. Now we've got the new document. If you see, there's a system check for quality school leaders. Everybody got that? I hope I put that one out. Okay. Whereas I agree completely with the subsystem that you just shared. In my mind, like, that's the clearest. The way you just said that, like that, in my mind, it's very similar to that. All the subunits. I want to offer a potential additional way to think about these arrows. We put a bunch of superintendents together and board members, and superintendents initially, and then did a value add with board members. And I was challenged with leading the group in determining what are the, initially they said 10 most important things that a district needs to be keeping their eye on. 10 things. So I started my list of 10, and it was 100. I had trouble narrowing it down. So we just kept going, we kept going, and we landed on these 30 processes. I'm not saying that this is in contradictory to what the trustee just shared about the subunits. I'm saying this is maybe complementary to that. I could think that a case could be made that these 30 processes could also be these arrows. Do we have a systematic process for good governance? Do we have a systematic process for listening and learning from our staff? Do we have a systematic process? I'm not reading to you. These are the ones that just pop into my mind. Translating data into knowledge. Do we have a systematic process for that? I don't think that just all of a sudden one day we say the district is a stage 4, is my point. You're only even thinking about the district at stage 4 if you've got these 30 things at stage 4. That, to me, that's the most concrete way to think about it. So you stop thinking about the district and you start thinking about the pieces of the district. And I think I might have told y'all, but at my retirement ceremony, they gave me a t-shirt that says, "We are stage 4." Because I was saying, we're not either. I mean, I just kept saying, I see pockets. I mean, we got some of it at stage 4, but not all of it. And they were kind of half joking, and they were kind of half serious, you know. But if it's continuous improvement, I don't know if you ever, say everything's all at stage 4. I mean, it would take decades, I would think, to get there. So this is the mindset thing here that we're talking about is this is a journey of 1,000 miles. Where do you start? I hope that these 30 processes are helpful and informative about, okay, let's pick 2 or 3 and let's take a step. And then let's pick 2 or 3 and then let's take a step. And let's pick 2 or 3 and let's take a step. Cabinet members specifically, the cabinet members across the state right now are saying that these are helpful when working on key strategic actions in the scorecard. That's why I'm saying the scorecard is a draft, because we didn't have time really to really dig into these. but I'm hearing cabinet members saying, I need to get my head wrapped around these processes, and then I need to go back to the scorecard, and I need to think about these key strategic actions. Now, does that make sense to you all now that we've talked about the difference between an objective and an action? I think I'm not saying it's like one-to-one, this one goes there and this one goes there, but it's like, these are some big concepts, that probably need to land somewhere in the scorecard. And then the final mindset, just in way of introduction here, is that no matter what we do, and some of these get at this, but we value people. And it's both internal and external. And it seems like, people say, we need to be customer focused. And I like that. Are we talking about internal customers or are we talking about external customers? Okay, right. External customers are, you could make a case for parents and students, right? And by the way, I'm not afraid today to call them customers because I heard the student count earlier and loss of students to vary. Okay, that's the classic definition of what a customer is. They are the user of your service and they can go somewhere else to receive a service. So that makes them a customer. All right. Mindset, like that's all the big picture stuff. So I just talked about it. We had a little brief conversation. You can forget all that. Okay? This is a big funnel and we're bringing the funnel down. So if the mindset are these big concepts, I would argue the best tool perhaps to think about a framework for the work is the systems check. Mindset are these big concepts: continuous improvement, systems approach, systems check, framework. Boom, we just went from all this stuff down to like, here's 30 things, that we're trying to write strategy around these 30 things. The scorecard that we can go ahead and bring up on the screen whenever someone smarter than me is ready is the performance management tool. So not mindset, framework, tool. The tool is the way that we get ourselves organized as a team of 15 to deliver on the work that lines up to the framework. Now I'm gonna pause and just do a little check. What is clear about what we just talked about? Someone share. What is clear? Let me start with what is unclear.
Well, let me just say, I'll talk about what's clear.
Okay.
Clear is actually just reaffirming the structure. And I think what I really appreciate, again, is that as a team of 8 and a team of 15 and so forth, that alignment and working together towards those goals are important. And so I really feel that that's real crystal clear and consistent with my values. We all have to be on the same team. And so now as we formulate goals for the district, superintendent goals, they can be based on that premise that we're all thinking the same. So that's real clear.
Yeah, and you use, Mr. President, the term structure, which I don't think I use, but I love that. Like, it's structure. It's
They're-
structure for the work, right?
Of course.
And so what is unclear? Thank you for sharing.
Well, I like the suggestion of being proactive instead of reactive.
Yes, ma'am.
Because when you're reactive, sometimes you make mistakes.
Yep.
It's like driving down the road and you swerve because there's something in the road, but that person to your left side,
Yeah.
they don't see what you're trying to get around, and next thing you know, you got a problem.
Yeah, the world is full of negative, unintended outcomes, right? Just things that we thought were positive, but had a whole list of negative, unintended. Like, it wasn't part of what the design was, it was just a negative impact to the decision. The pandemic, I believe, threw the world, but definitely public education, into the world's largest game of whack-a-mole. And I think your timing is really good right now to just say, can we set down the mallets and get out of whack-a-mole And because we just started spinning. And and if you don't say, everybody stop, let's recalibrate, it's hard. I mean, we're juggling plates. And it's just like, how do we decide or if these are the right plates? I mean, I don't know. I can't look at them. I'm spinning them, you know? So we're saying, everybody set down the plates for just a moment. Everybody on the team of 15, let's set down the plates for just a second. Let's turn our back to the fire. Let's not stare at the fire. And let's, if we're going to be proactive, if we have a chance of being proactive, we have to agree on what we're trying to accomplish. How many of you have heard the term, let's get everybody on the same page?
Yes.
Okay, and we all desire that, right? Like, as a superintendent and board member on TRS, I wanted everybody on the same page. The scorecard is literally the page. That's why it's the tool, it's the performance management tool. This stuff gets a little theoretical and a little like meant to challenge us and make us think. The scorecard should make us think, but it should make us do. It's the execution. We're going to do thinking here for a little while together, and then once the board adopts the strategic objectives, there's always thinking. But we cannot sit around and just think ourselves into a scorecard working. There has to be some thinking. That's the planning. Plan, do, check, act. Plan, think. What's the next thing? Plan what? Do. Do something. Learn from the something. Check the results of it, and then start it over again. So here comes the scorecard. I thought I saw it. Every time you pause, I get another thought, and okay. There we go. I was just going to say 60-year-old eyes, but you already knew that was coming. So and we're going to do, I think, like a 30-minute run through President Macias and Dr. Fields, so just a 30-minute run through, if that sounds all right with everyone, and just get
Yes, sir.
some general feedback. So I can't remember if I asked this, but you all just remind me, we pulled your previous beliefs and mission and vision, and it seems like we had a conversation that we feel like there's nothing wrong with those, generally speaking. We just don't have, well, I may be wrong about that. Well, no, I may be wrong. And if they need a value add, we can do a value add to them. I would ask the trustees to just, equitable education, I'm just paraphrasing here, culture of service, respect, honesty, open communication, innovation, collaboration, positive relationships among student, staff, family, community members. All Judson ISD mission, all Judson ISD students will receive a quality education, enabling them to be successful in a global society. And vision, Judson ISD is producing excellence. I can tell you that those meet the definitions of belief, mission, and vision.
Yeah, I'm still comfortable with that, and I mean, you're on point.
I don't think that they will in any way negatively alter the trajectory of the objectives. I would just say that if something feels misaligned as we dig into the objectives, then we can go back and revisit, does this belief line up? Or do those beliefs line
Understood.
up?
Yes,
But if
sir.
everybody's good with just, it's like a go, no go. Like, is it close enough that it's a go, and we go ahead and work with the caveat that we can come back to it if we need to. May I have one of those? Not that, I'm going to share with you, okay? I want to look there and here at the same time. So the structure of the Kaplan and Norton scorecard in its original intent was to get at clarity between strategic objectives and strategic actions and leading measures and lagging measures. So if you're going, now that there's some hard copies out there, if you're going to take notes on it, which I'd recommend, column 1 are your 4 priorities. And when that says board adopted, that doesn't mean you have adopted it. It just means the board adopts it. Okay, the board will adopt. And by the way, we have not, y'all remind me, we didn't really wordsmith column 1 and column 2. We just put terms down that meant something that we all agreed to.
Based on the feedback that you had received from the board.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
So, but these aren't wordsmith.
Not
I
at
just want to make sure the board knows that. It's just like the concept written down. Sometimes you can get in the ditch on wordsmithing. We'll do that later. I didn't want wordsmithing to precede good thinking.
Well, and I don't want to be in a ditch, so.
Yeah, we'll come back to wordsmithing later. So you have
Okay.
priority 1, student academic achievement and success. Priority 2, faculty and staff. Priority 3, stakeholder engagement. And priority 4, finance and operations, correct?
Yes, sir.
Trustees, does that make sense? So y'all are, with LSG background and your HB3 goals, you're used to this top part of it, right? Like, we're used to that, trustees. What we're recommending is that you also set strategic targets around staff and around community and around financial operation. We believe strongly in that. Kaplan and Norton just said it's a balanced perspective. We don't balance, the reason you see up there at the very top center, balance, that means the balance between the 4 perspectives and the balance within the 4 perspectives. It's both. My boss is fond of saying, I'll fix all of your STAR scores this year, as long as you don't care how many teachers quit next year, right? So that's that balance between perspective 1 or priority 1 and priority 2. Okay, so column 1, trustees, feedback, does it make sense? 4 different priorities. Green light on, again, they're not worded. We haven't wordsmithed them, but student, staff, community, finance. Like, we're good with that? Okay, I'm gonna take a step. Then we're gonna go to column 2, and we're really going to dig in more on column 2 in the next 30 minutes. We almost only showed column 2, but the ultimate goal for this document is for it to be transparent for the team of 15. And so column 2 are the objectives that we're going to ask the board to adopt. But do you see the two next columns that are gray? They're a different color. The reason they're shaded differently is, and it says never board adopted. So here's like the big concept where this is different than other models. If we think that the tactical team needs the agility to change an action and not necessarily bring it back to the board for adoption. Not the objective. The objective is the constant direction that we're headed to for, let's talk about this for a second, 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28, 4 years. You see at the top, 24 to 28. We would hope, ideally, that column 2 does not change for those 4 years. Once the board adopts it, we stay true to that. Now here's the caveat, because see, if I was a superintendent and y'all remember Paul Harvey? The rest of the story, that's right. So if I was a superintendent and I heard, okay, board's adopting those objectives, we're staying true to them, and they don't adopt the actions, cool, let's go. Here's the caveat that's like underline, underline, underline. So the strategic team, the board, adopts the objectives, column 2. The tactical team, key tactical actions, they work on this stuff. The tactical team, I believe this strongly, owes a systematic process to the strategic team on progress. Not just, I think we're doing pretty good at 1.1, don't you, Kristen? We're doing good, board. We're doing good at 1 point. No, it's 1.1, it's growth at student achievement. Our key strategic actions are ensure curriculum alignment, monitor implementation of Tier 1 instruction, and use data to drive decision-making. Now, trustees, we want to share with you some of our leading indicators that we look at to see if we're making progress or not.
With our former Lone Star governance, there was a calendar put together
Very similar.
Superintendent's report
I
would
saw
brief
you.
out once a month. Are you recommending the same on?
Yeah, kind of. So this, I don't know y'all's experience, and I'm not a Lone Star governance trainer, so I'm going to say that right off the bat. Down later in the agenda, I've just heard, and I think this is true in any organization, that if you're not careful, those become very rote. And yes, you're doing, we're looking at data. I personally, well, let me say it this way. I think it's better for the tactical team and the strategic team, for the strategic team to get off the dais and get down here for a scorecard update.
Got
In the military, I know we have at least one military. Is anybody else who, okay, right. So the concept of a no rank meeting, like we're going to close the door. No rank meetings don't happen with the doors open, right? And they sure don't happen on the steps of the Pentagon, right? Okay, like all the.
No, everybody take the vote. Luckily, Velcro was a hell of a lot easier once it became Velcro, right thing, and everybody took it off in the middle of the table because there were no bad ideas in the room.
That's
There was no
big-
rank in the room because
That's
otherwise
right.
when rank's on, everybody thinks the boss is right and everybody just group thinks, and tells them what they want to hear. So, and then, that relationship led to a common understanding that when you went out there and you were briefing with ranks on, then it was we called it actionable intelligence, right? It wasn't data for the sake of data. It'd be like, hey, sir, there's some tanks over there. So, hey, sir, I think they're massing their tanks over here. Our artillery can't reach them.
Right.
I need to recommend that you reposition
Yep.
our artillery over here so that we are within range of where I think they are massing their tanks. That's actionable intelligence versus, hey, bunch of tanks. He doesn't know what to do with that, or she
And
doesn't know what to do with
and
it.
so the concept, you said Velcro, that meant like ranks are coming off. We're going to talk about 1.2, or 1.1. And trustees here and cabinet members, like everybody's head's probably going to, oh my gosh, the first time we do that, it's just the whole conversation's going to go in the ditch. Maybe not. I would the first time I heard it. That's where my head would have gone. There has to be structure around it, because if we're going to say we're going to have a no rank, I like to call them strategic roundtables. Roundtables mean like we're all sitting here and we're going to peel back on 1.1. Who are my 1.1 experts right here, right?
Yes.
The two of you, right? And that there's everybody in here knows what 1.1 is and has a role. But you, trustees, y'all have hired two tacticians here to be in charge, and doctor. I mean, how many PhDs does it take? Here we go. But the concept of I could see them leading the 1.1 conversation. Right? Who's going to start it besides the two of them? But the strategic roundtable concept is to say, pardon me just a second, I need to understand this MOI on Amplify. I need deeper understanding of that. So for the board members, it doesn't mean all of a sudden you've got these two, their jobs. You're trying to learn. And then, by the way, and this gets to your point on the no rank that you said earlier, then they're hearing something from a trustee and thinking, oh, I hadn't thought about it from that lens. Then there's learning over here. But if you don't have a structure like, we're going to do 1.1 for an hour, those no rank strat meetings in the military, were they set on a certain time, like we've got 2 hours?
Absolutely not. They really, truly weren't. And the conversation ends when the conversation ends. You never know where it was going to go. Some people may have some places to go and people would have to float in and out, but there was just joke, train to time, not to standard. That's not what we want to do. We don't train to time. We train till we reach the objective that we want to reach. So however long that takes, and I know that gets some tedious for some people, right? Like you're asking for too many details, you're all talking
Right.
too much type thing, and they just want to cut everything off on a time limit. And some people want to talk more, and I don't know how we're going to resolve that.
Yeah,
with the
no,
team.
I'm glad that
So-
that's coming up right now, because if you lined up, so there's I'm going to say 1,000 school districts. There's more than that, but I'm not good at math. So 1,000 school districts and 7 to 9 board members. So let's say 7 board members in all of them. So there's 7,000 approximate school board members in the state of Texas. It's actually closer to 10,000. But let's say 7,000. And you asked each of them, how much time do you want to spend on this? I swear to you, you would get 7,000 different answers. Like, because one trustee is like, I am way too busy to do a deep dive, and another one is like, just I'm intellectually curious about it. So the answer to me on the structure around a strategic roundtable, if that's the direction we go, is whatever the board, meaning all 7 and the superintendent primarily, that team of 8 can reach consensus what is enough. Like, what is enough to know we are headed in the right direction? Some districts do a 15-minute update at a regular meeting. That's it. Some districts do a 15-minute update at a regular meeting and a monthly strategic roundtable. Some districts just do a strategic roundtable. Yeah.
And Dr. Gibson, obviously, as we create these goals, the board obviously still needs to weigh in on it as well. I know you've met with cabinet, but the board has input on it. One of the things structurally would be to, again, reevaluate how many meetings to have. I mean, it's not the first time we've talked about potentially having 2 meetings a month because the content is rich. Just putting time frames, because our administration gets tired, so do board members, right? So we need to look at the structure based on what these objectives are, and I would imagine that would be a reasonable conversation.
When you, and there, so some of you, this is going to sound like a lot, and some of you, this is going to sound like not enough, is my hunch. If you did priority 1 month, priority 2 the next month, priority 3 the next month, priority 4 the next month, another way to look at it would be a half of 1 month, a half of 1 another month, 2 and 3 together 1 month, 4 another month, because there's a lot in priority 1, as there should be. Then you have gone through the scorecard one time in 1 semester, if you want to think about it that way. Do that in the fall, turn around and do it in the spring. So then the team of 15 together has gone through the scorecard twice in an annual cycle. I'm not saying that's the way to do it. I'm just saying that might be, and see, for some of you that I'm thinking you're thinking, man, that's a lot. And then some of you are thinking that's not enough. Okay, so we have to find where the answer is, in between. Yes, sir.
Well, I have a couple other comments. I'm not seeing innovation on here in terms of the objective. Where would it fall under innovation?
That is a really good question.
I think it's kind of embedded in a number of them. Innovation leads to students who want to be in school and participate. It also can lead to increased student outcomes, which is what the whole point, the big point of it is. So I think you can see that reflected in a number of the P1s.
Yeah, so here, okay, so if, I think just for the sake of everyone's time and energy, if innovation goes in column 2, it's a thing all by itself. If innovation shows up in strategic actions throughout, then it's ubiquitous to like all the stuff that we're doing. Ma'am, that might be what you were saying. Like, okay, so, but I'm hearing, this is a note, like innovation, like where, okay, how did I start it? Where does it fit?
Right.
Yeah, where does innovation fit in this?
It's in a bunch of different places. I mean, we talk in here about parent and family satisfaction and engagement. Most of our innovative techniques at the campus are related to just that, student and parent engagement. And then it could be also in finance.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
Mr. Macias,
just a thought that as I'm looking through this, that came to mind. Ms.
yes, ma'am.
Ms. Rodriguez?
So what I was going to say is like, it could also be like, if it is something that is truly woven throughout, it could be, would it live in the beliefs part of it? Like, we believe in innovating in education in order to reach our outcomes or something?
It's good.
I like it.
Okay.
that's what I was looking at. I was going to say we could alter the mission to say, all Judson ISD students will receive a quality, innovative education.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback, that's great feedback, like it needs to be up at the top, right? Okay. We want that in all caps, red, flashing? Well, but no, that's good, that's a good calibration that it's there, right? And we're looking back up there to,
And Dr. Gibson, again, the reason why is because obviously we have someone who is responsible for innovation on the cabinet. We've done things that have been innovative in terms of campuses like Park Village. And so there is a measurability in outcomes that's tied to innovation. We even had a year-long program for Converse Elementary, year-long that we phased out. But it was still an innovative attempt. Pre-K for everyone was another innovative attempt that needs to be kind of calculated in outcomes because we're going to measure that outcome.
I am wondering, Mr. Macias, listening to that,
But I have to disagree.
Sure. Go
I
ahead,
think
Ms.
it should be an overall umbrella because innovation for Park Village looks different than innovation for Hopkins because they have grants, Hopkins doesn't. If we tie it to the outcomes, then we're comparing apples to oranges. If we put it in the big umbrella at the very top, it means no matter what the innovation is, it's an innovation. We're going to work towards innovation, but Hopkins doesn't have the same innovation as Park Village. Kitty Hawk doesn't have the same innovation as Herbie Middle School.
Yes.
It's all different, but the goal is innovation. So I think if we leave it general, it becomes an umbrella we're all working under. If we tie it to outcomes, we're saying,
That's
here's
specific.
innovation.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you brought oranges to the party for apples. Not acceptable.
I mean, and somewhere in the middle, we can find common ground on that. I don't want it to be confusing. I just simply want to wait for us as a board to be strategic in our innovation. Like, for example, if I said I want pre-K to 12 STEM Academy, that's, again, innovative, but how are we going to get there? Part of all that kind of stuff that's part of this that brings the team together on, yeah, I like this STEM Academy idea. But anyway, just,
Ms. Davis wanted to.
so
yeah, Ms. Davis?
I'm listening and what, no, that's right, good.
Ms. Davis wanted to say something first, real quick.
Sorry,
Hi.
I'm reading and not looking at who's grabbing the mic, so I apologize.
I'm currently the board member over innovation.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that when the Office of Innovation was established, one of the things, or the reasons why we innovate is to try and solve a problem. We don't innovate for innovation's sake.
Right.
And when we do that, it truly could be embedded into different areas. So for example, we think of strategic funding in order to carry out the innovation. So in that case, it could be looked at as under finance. Then when we're talking about looking at our campuses that are historically underperforming and then developing a specialized program and give it proof of concept, then you usually give it about 3 years. Part to what Ms. Faulkner was saying is we also have to be willing as a community of leaders to accept that innovation is not going to be the right fit for the district, but that wouldn't necessarily be considered an outcome of failure. It's really taking the risk forward in
Right.
doing that. So we have to be careful in considering what that outcome is going to look like, but not be afraid to try something new. And then truly understand that as an innovative district, there are pieces that would fall under any one of these four current
So
objectives.
could one of those two words, those fit under key tactical actions?
They could, and they could fit under each one of those
That's right,
areas.
like wherever it fit. And I'm wondering if, see, there's some white space there. We're going to take out trustees never board adopted. Like this is just a work, okay, so everybody, okay, like that's going out, that's just trying to help. But there's some white space under key tactical actions. Mr. Macias, my mind, the more I listened to you and other trustees, my mind was going towards innovative strategic actions noted in red. Do you see? And
Sure.
since you've made that kind of commitment to it, then we're showing where those fit throughout. And the others are primarily the key tactical actions that we're trying to just get better at the stuff we're already doing. I like the concept of sprinkling the innovation throughout to show areas that we're targeting specific innovation.
I think
Dr.
Ms. Ryan had a comment. I'd
Yep.
like her to respond.
Well, because a little of what Ms. Davis was saying is that innovation is one of the actions under a bigger umbrella, which is the strategic position within the educational marketplace. By being an innovative campus is one way we do that, but we do that in other ways too. We do that by having amazing athletics programs. We do that by having not just great fine arts programs, but what are we doing to improve that? Hey, we competed at all these regional band things this year. Are we going to state? Are we going to national? How do we become where we have premier academics, we have premier fine arts? It's not just doing blended learning or doing something different. It's how do we do what we routinely do, but doing it at that higher level so that people choose Judson, the less expensive to educate kids, continue to choose Judson, because that's where we're hemorrhaging right now, which are the less costly to educate kids, parents who have choices. And if we don't offer STEM in the northern end of the district, they're not going to drive down to Judson Middle School to go to JSTEM. They're going to drive over to SST or BASIS because it's closer and it's
Just
got better scores
geography.
type thing.
Yeah.
So what are we doing to strategically place ourselves in order to not lose that? Because we got to have a balance of kids, right? Like the reason we have financial problems is not necessarily the state. It's because look at our bell curve, right? There's kids that are inexpensive to educate. There's kids that are expensive to educate. And the state gives you 6160 off of a median bell curve. So as we lose families who are inexpensive to educate, right? They show up, they don't need tons of services, do great on their STAR test, right? And then we have some more expensive special education. We got to go 1-to-4 ratios. That just cost us more. But once our ratios go out of whack,
Yeah.
that's when the state doesn't adjust you. You know, you get a little bit of credits, but we need to go back to a balanced student population where the cost of educating kids is the natural curve, because if we keep moving to the right and losing all these kids because we don't have a competitive edge in that educational marketplace, then those finances are just going to continue to get more and more out of whack as the charter schools and maybe vouchers start just picking off some of those kids.
So where, yes,
Hold on. I think Dr. Fields had a comment, and then Ms. Stanford.
I was only going to say that we could, just like innovation, Dr. Gosh had mentioned technology could be implemented across the board as well. But I'm more interested in the conversation
Okay.
that we've got going on.
Ms. Stanford, then I'll get right back to you, Dr. Gibson.
Conversations, it's just beginning to sound to me like maybe innovation is more of a strategy or an approach to a situation than it is a goal in itself.
Correct.
that's what I'm here. I mean, because it just needs to be embedded throughout. And Krista just said, innovation goes somewhere here. I mean, you know, like, and that's a good note, because it's somewhere in that column 3.
It's not an item that we can plug into this by itself, though, isn't it?
Right.
Or the way we approach things across the
I think
board?
it would be not productive to call it an objective, because then you could have a room over here where it's the innovation zone and it's never going anywhere but the innovation zone, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if we embed it in the actions, we're meant to operationalize innovation, I think. Is that right? I mean, you're trying to find something that you need innovation to work on, to help. Okay.
Dr. Gosh?
Yeah, so I was going to say the innovation is similar to some of the other important priorities that I know. Safety and security, obviously, we passed a bond. It's an important piece in what you guys are interested in, what our students are in our community. But yet it's not necessarily one of these, because it's embedded in each one of those. We know that we aren't going to have safety and security. If we don't have that, our students are not going to learn. Those foundational needs aren't going to be met. Our CCMR is not going to be met. Our facilities are not going to be where they need to be. And the technology is a piece of that as well. And innovation, like you said, is a strategy. So I think there's multiple priorities that you guys have that we report on that may not necessarily be reflected in just the straight words that you see, but they
Right.
are embedded into every single one of these different areas.
And some of, especially safety, there are required compliance reports that you're going to give no matter what. And so the board's going to hear that during those. Yep. Okay, very good. And this was, who brought up innovation? The president did. Okay, that was a really good exercise in the difference between an objective and an action, right? Like, that was a great example. Like, where does it fit? It sounds like innovation is a key tactical action that's ubiquitous to all four perspectives, is what I heard.
In the mission, maybe, where all students receive a quality education utilizing innovative approaches, enabling them to be successful.
I'm seeing handwritten notes over here, belief, mission, emphasize innovation. So like, that's the feedback tonight. Like, I'm thinking that's the follow-up step.
You had that too?
No, yeah, I'm reading it, yeah, I'm reading the notes, so that's, okay. Okay, so the objectives, board adopted objectives, now we know that we have these key strategic actions. And by the way, the reason my 2-hour meeting the other day became a 6-hour meeting, I was only going to introduce column 2, and then I looked up and they basically had their backs turned to me, and they were just, like, once we got, yeah, they were just like, I was like, and Dr. Fields was like, do I stop them? I was like, no, let them go. Because that, like, they're doing it, like, they're doing this stuff. So they went ahead, and there was a little bit of like, do we show this to the board tonight? And I feel like if I was a trustee, and the cabinet members felt the same way, you could not give us feedback on 1.1 strategic objective if you didn't see what some of the tactical actions and measures look like. Is that a fair statement? Like, you need to see that stuff in order to know what's happening in that. But here's a big, broad question. Growth in student achievement, 1.1, student experience and well-being. We had that conversation during the verse SWOT, and here I remember like a lot of it. That's why it's right up. And then, of course, we won't use, or we will minimize acronyms as much as we can when it's final draft, but that's college, career, military ready, which you really technically are getting 3 objectives for 1 with that one. Because if you break it out like they have, here's some actions around college, here's some actions around, so you really have 5 key strategic objectives, right? 1.1, 1.2, 1.3A, 1.3B, 1.3C. So you get 5 strategic objectives in essence. So looking just at priority 1, 3 strategic objectives, feedback, trustees, any feedback, other than the pages of notes that Dr. Saunders has already written over here, and others. We're sharing the page. It's just a draft, so you're just green lighting them to go back into it deeper around what you see on page right now.
Are we commenting on this? You were just
Well, it's just like they're. I mean, if you see, I mean, they're taking notes, and again, I'm sharing with Dr. Saunders, so I'm looking, but like, she's doing the where does it fit over here as y'all are talking, like, where does that fit, you know, and and I'm sure that, I'm seeing notes, that's in purple pen there, I mean, we're going to compare notes when this is over and we go back to the scorecard.
I was just thinking, if we do have technology and innovation as part of our tactical actions, how is that added to growth in student achievement, and how are we identifying that under our tactical actions? So I know we're doing it, we just need to put it in here.
Progress measures.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and let's talk about these arrows real briefly. I sometimes don't do this in this meeting, but I think I'm going to tonight. The concept of the district scorecard, So this says Judson ISD. If you think about these arrows, I would never recommend doing a district scorecard that you did not also have a cascaded scorecard to the campuses and departments. Okay, so the belief, the mission, the vision, the 4 priorities, and the strategic objectives stays the same. Now this says blank elementary, these actions are off, and they're working on their key strategic actions towards that goal at the next tier of work. So you might say, well, which one are they responsible for, the district one or the campus one? The answer, yes. Okay, as a campus principal, how do I support the district scorecard? And then now I'm at my campus level and I'm getting deeper, and then I'm thinking there's a technology department somewhere, right? Generally, there is, right? They have a scorecard. They're building out key strategic actions aligning transportation department. You might think transportation department, what does it have 1.1? On-time delivery, reduction of discipline. Like, that's 1.1 stuff. If we get them on time and we haven't made anyone upset, they're better equipped to learn, right? Does that make sense on the cascaded scorecard? So because if we're not careful, we jam too much stuff in the district big picture, and that's how we're getting these arrows aligned. Now the campuses don't just write goals to write goals, they line up to these objectives, the board adopted objectives. And then that lines up who does sip and dip in here, who's the lucky winner. Okay, so but do you see how that helps with the alignment of sip and dip? Is she trying to hand it off to someone? Yeah. Okay, right. Does it make sense, though, if we are writing actions aligning to these objectives, then it's not, that's very consistent with what you need to do with a sip and a dip?
That makes a lot of sense to me to see that our campus plans align to a district plan, rather than them just making up whatever. And I think that will help the campuses and departments as well. Here's our focus. Now, how does what you do, how does that relate to this focus? And they're not having to come up with their stuff on their own.
That's correct. And there's a sense of comfort to know this feels like the right stuff to do, but now I see that it lines right up to what we adopted as 1.1 or 1.2 or 1.3. It also, I tried to ignore earlier parts of the conversation, but it's hard for me sometimes just because I've had a lot of board meetings under my belt. But and I'm not saying that you need to consider strategic abandonment. I'm not saying that. But if you did decide that you needed to do strategic abandonment, against what criteria? It's arbitrary if you don't have it in writing.
Ms. Faulkner had a remark.
So just to recap, what I hear you saying is, we really want to keep this the top of the funnel, and it'll cascade down to not only each department, but each campus, and that is where technology and innovation should really be plugged in, because it may look different
That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
at each campus.
That's what
And
prompted me to think I need to say
Okay.
cascaded scorecard.
I was just
No, it's
making
perfect.
my brain
No,
I think it
connect.
makes sense.
because I usually mention cascaded scorecard at the next meeting, but it's like, we're there. Yeah, like we're at it right now. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that was a common, test in the military when you're out, when you're planning a war game thing is, it was whether, the general or the colonel could go out and find some sergeant out on a battlefield. And he had to
Repeat the
know,
same.
how do you
Yeah.
play into the bigger picture,
Yep.
right? What are you doing here today? How do you play into the bigger picture? What are you doing to support the person to your left, or are they supporting you? What are you doing to support the person to your right? And what are the people underneath you doing? So if this doesn't become, I always pick on athletics. I'll pick on Mr. Witt today. So if Mr. Witt doesn't take this for fine arts and sit down with all of his department chairs at all of his schools and so say, okay, where's our 4-5-year fine arts strategic plan to elevate the levels of our jazz bands and our choirs, and what are we doing to support this? And then they're going back to their campuses and talking to the choir and all the fine arts working together to make sure that they're all synchronized and be like, hey, let's put on a full-service musical, and we'll get the orchestra, the band, and the theater guys like all together. If you don't vertically align with the people above and below you from both a campus and a position, and then you're not horizontally aligned across departments and across campuses, like Kirby Middle School needs to know what Metzger's doing. They don't have to copy each other, but you got to know what everybody's doing above and below you.
Yep.
So once this is executed, if we're wandering around on a campus, you know, I really pray that a year from now I can run into some teacher or some staff member and be like, how do you fit in the big picture? What's your role?
Well, and the wandering around on campuses, I got stuck there. I heard everything you said. So I asked trustees to round with me, just so you all know, less than a quorum. I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but like we were trying to figure out so we, I rounded once a month on every campus and every department. And that took a lot to get that done.
They did. At one of the conferences when we just went to Galveston, one of the people were talking about is they invited all their board members on instructional walks, and there was a board member on every instructional walk at every campus, and they just had a rotating schedule, and it's like, all of a sudden, these board members knew what a Eureka book looked like. They understand what the little mouth word wall, they knew what all of these things were, and it just made more sense.
The concept is for learning for trustees, not for telling, just to be real blunt, right? Like, and that's a good example. Like, I've set up on that desk and I've approved Eureka Learning, and so now I have an opportunity to go see what that means, So as long as and that's a great, learning walks is a great way to do it. I would round with campus administrators, and then they would invite their lead teacher teams, and the campuses would get an email, the next round, Dr. Gibson wants to talk about 1.3 and 2.2. And so we got to talk about the whole scorecard, but they knew it was 1 point, whatever I said, I can't remember, but 1.2, and so like they were, but see, that's common language. Now that 2.1 means something to everybody. 1.3 means something to everybody. I was walking down a hallway 3 years in, and a kindergarten teacher said, hey, Dr. Gibson, I want to show you the best thing we're doing for 1.1. Kindergarten teacher. I'm like, what? And she didn't even know what she did. She was just talking. And I was just wanted to go, oh, I'm not worthy. Like, you know what 1.1 is. Like, this is the highlight of my life, which is kind of true. Like, I nerd out on this stuff. Okay, so we're talking about just this common language, but then the cascading. And by the way, Kaplan and Norton at Harvard Business School, 1990s, said high-performing organizations may eventually cascade 3 tiers. But anything beyond 3 tiers, there's not any research on that. So we toyed with that after 12 years in SCUC, and it became the English department at the high school, the math department, right? So district scorecard, campus scorecard, and then the departments, and then y'all, I don't know how you're struggling grade level. Do you have like grade level teams? So first grade scorecard, second grade scorecard. That was after 4 or 5 years. I'm just saying that. I'm going to make sure you pay, because now I think you could cascade to campuses and departments after a year. Like, work on this, and then, in fact, you adopt the district scorecard. Your principals, some of them, maybe many of them, are immediately going to start saying, wait a minute, I've got more to tell you about 1.1 or 2. Okay, that's the cascaded scorecard. Like that, now you're talking about the way you do your things to drive this. All right.
Can you speak more about the long-term outcomes, though, where it says the board adopted after year 1 of scorecard implementation?
And thank you, because we've been primarily over on the left-hand side of the scorecard. Let's go to the right-hand side. So the formula here, in parentheses, do you see it says input, output, outcome? So an input is an action, And by the way, this is a manufacturing terminology, but like it works for any work. Action is an input. That's the stuff we're doing.
Yes, sir.
Output is how are we checking progress of that action on short cycles, monthly, quarterly.
Correct.
In our case, 6 weeks, 9 weeks, semester. I'm checking in on that. Outcome can mean two things at the same time. Usually it means where do we want some big number to be by 2028? Like if we say growth in student achievement, there is such a thing as a growth measure, right? Okay, so make up a number. Unless you know it, but what's the growth? What's your growth, district-wide growth number?
61.
Okay, imagine my surprise that she knows it. Someone taught you well when you were back in school. So the question then, if it's at 61%, can we get it to what by 2028?
71.
Okay, so now that's looking at it one way, a 10% gain. This is 24, 25, 25, 26, 26, 27, 27, 28. If 10% is the gain for all four of those, how big a bite
Two
can
at the beginning.
2, 4, 6, 8, 3, 5, 7, whatever, right? But that's why I'm saying it can be two things at once. It's this whole journey, but it's then what are we going to get in the year? What are we going to get in the year? What are we going to get in the year? What are we going to get in the year? To hopefully be at the 10% by the end. Everything in the far right column, to your question, should be in X to Y by Z format. And I think that's very consistent with.
After 1 year of adoption.
Right. The first year of work, well, you guys the other
baseline.
day, when I turned my back and went and used the restroom, got a bottle of water, y'all started doing it.
Oh, yes.
But we're just saying we need a little bit of time to make sure those are the right things. Then, Mr. Macias and trustees, the board could adopt the outcome column in a year. That's the year thing. I'm saying don't just set it and then don't adopt the two columns over here and then expect to know everything you need to know on what those numbers need to be. And I'm saying up to a year.
Okay.
Like during this year, you're getting tighter on what those need to be. And that should be what this strategic roundtable is talking about. What's the measure that we know that we're getting to where we need to be?
I have a question just for some clarification purposes. Naturally, this exercise started because we wanted to kind of build the structure, put this plan, reevaluate things. But the ultimate goal, too, is to use this as a platform to establish superintendent goals for our superintendent so that we can evaluate his performance. Obviously, I see some evaluation aspects here, but for the sake of myself and my colleagues, when will we be at that point? Because naturally, as time goes on this evening, we need to provide input on what
Right.
some of what we feel are important and what we'd like to incorporate as superintendent goals for just discussion. And of course, administration is tied to the superintendent because the superintendent hires his team and
Yeah.
builds the cabinet. And I see all of this reinforcing that end. So what is, I guess, your expectation for us to get to that point where we're actually adopting actual goals for the superintendent?
Absolutely. And by the way, I just remember my cabinet saying, good luck on your evaluation tonight with me. And I'm like, I'm not being evaluated. We are being evaluated, But that was my mindset. Like, this is everybody's stuff. I'm just the one person that, gets to field it all. So I personally feel strongly that column 2, the strategic objectives for the board, those are the superintendent's goals. Now, to your question maybe a little more specifically, we've got to get clarity about that 5th column, the outcomes. As a general rule, and I don't know what y'all have talked about, so I may be stepping on toes and all that, and I apologize, it's not intentional if I do, because I don't know what you've talked about before now. I think in the first year of implementation of this, you evaluate the superintendent on the progress towards the tactics, like building the structure, building the plan. Then year 2, you should have those outcome measures adopted, and you should be able to know where you are. You remember a while ago when I was doing like 1 year, next year, next year, next year? By year 2, you should know if we hit that annual bite of that 4-year. So it's about year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My last evaluation after 12 years took about 15 minutes because I had it highlighted in green, all the targets we had hit, and highlighted in yellow where we barely missed them, and red on the ones I missed.
Ms. Rodriguez?
So thinking about like the superintendent's evaluation and thinking about like what you said about it's the tactical measures being in place, then would that then be kind of like a benchmarking year? Like this is year
Yeah.
0 of this is where we
Yes.
stand, and like the superintendent's ability to say, here's where we are.
Correct.
Is a measure that those progress.
That's correct.
Those things are in place.
And,
Okay.
and get this agreement with the
Yeah.
team of 15 on what the target is.
Okay.
Because he's got to navigate, he's the only one that lives in both strategic and tactical. So that's what we're charging him with, is getting this whole group on the same page of what column 5 is.
Okay.
I'd even add that as we went through this, Mr. Rodriguez, we started looking at some of the things that we're going to use to measure the outcomes. We still have to create. So we have to create a survey that goes out and specifically looks for some of the items to where we can determine the return on investment of what we're trying to do in that particular area. On some of them, it'll be a lot clearer when the STAR scores come back. But it usually, and to your point, it probably won't take a year on everything.
I'd just say
but
up to.
It could
Like, it
take
could
some
take-
time to determine exactly how we're going to evaluate some stuff and put it together. And then you guys feel like it's a legitimate enough outcome response to determine whether or not we're successful in that area. Does it cover everything? So that's what we noticed today, and that's why that year came up. But again, we don't think that it's going to take that long. It's just that some of the stuff we do have to create, because the panorama survey doesn't cover everything.
And I would just also we're going through this now, and the challenge of our financial situation, unlike every other district in Texas, but the board ultimately makes decisions, and those decisions have a financial impact. But if we're going to look at finances for the superintendent and say, hey, you need to be at zero balance budget, we're the ones, the board, that took action that didn't allow that. So I guess just putting that scenario into the picture, we have to be fair. If the tactics say, let's be zero, and I don't know if that's what it says, but I'm just giving the example, be zero balance, but the board has made a decision to give pay raises like we did last year. The importance was retention, so we'll look at retention because we're trying to support the strategic
Okay,
plan.
that's the balance of the scorecard. We're going to do something down here that is
Yes.
to help up here. That's a good,
So that scenario is appropriate, and you'll see that live annually through things?
yeah, absolutely. And next Monday night, I think this helps with this. And by the way, let me add one thing. And I can send you, Mr. Macias, a copy of a scorecard that has been retrofitted to be a superintendent evaluation instrument, if that's helpful. Okay, like you can just see it. We add a 5th component to it, but this is only for the superintendent appraisal, not for the district scorecard, and it's just board superintendent relations. Okay, so that it's the 5th component, but it's the same concept. Here are 5 things that are objectives: communication, ability to, and then what are the key strategic actions that the superintendent's taking to make that Friday updates, stuff like that. And then the board, now that one doesn't really have, that one on the outcome column is just up to the board. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, that's the perception of the board on the board superintendent relation, if that makes sense. Next week, I'm sitting down with a team that's been at this for 2 years, and they've evaluated the superintendent. I'm trying to not give too much detail. And they have recommendations. They were wanting to set what they called superintendent goals. And I said, wait a minute, I'm pointing to 3 other documents that you said the strategic objectives of the boards are the superintendent's goals. So now, which list is the superintendent's goals? So we're renaming this list of feedback to the board to be superintendent's areas of focus to support the district's strategic objectives. So now the superintendent and the board's adopting these. And by the way, they had 10, and when we started comparing it to the 4 priorities, they realized that they were kind of lining up to here's one for students, here's one for staff, here's one for community, here's one for finance. So next week, we're getting them down to 4. So the superintendent has 4 areas of focus to support the district scorecard. And this is all amicable. And, we went through the process, and the superintendent's like telling the staff, the board is doing this to put some energy around some stuff that they feel like is lagging in the scorecard. And this is their official statement that we feel like it's lagging. Does that make sense? Like their official statement is saying we're adopting this as the superintendent's areas of focus, which means superintendent, block a path for some of this stuff, right? We're giving you the green light to go clear a path for some of this.
Well, and I'll just add, just since this is the opportunity to add or enhance or get clarity on it, obviously it's a lot to look through. So the innovation part or the concerns as a board member strategically would be to have innovative plans that address poverty and economically disadvantaged students. And so having something tied to the superintendent's or the district's objectives would be of interest to me personally. But again, this is why we're talking about it, because it's certainly something that we may need to add to tactical, because if let me just put it out there, if I want to eventually look at superintendent goals and objectives, I would like to see some focus on students that are vulnerable and what those challenges are in terms of addressing their social emotional wellness as well as their academic wellness. But just so that we're looking at, and it could be under equity. I mean, again, I'm just kind of putting all that out there so that we as a board, when we're adopting this strategy and there's tactics behind it, that it's spelled out, because that's very clear that our district is in need of that support.
Yeah, and so I'm seeing equitable education as
And I
belief
think-
number 1.
I think Ms. Rodriguez has a
sorry.
remark.
Just to build off of that, I think a suggestion I might make is like maybe that lives in the measures that we're using, and saying something like, for example, ELAR meets from blank to blank with no gaps amongst
Okay,
demographic
that's
groups
good.
or something like that.
That's a good thought. Because we have in belief number 1, equitable education, we're saying don't just roll the big number up over here on the right, show us some of the sub numbers to the big number, and then you got it. I think that's, and
Yeah.
and then you're saving a lot of words that might get people confused, because right out there it's saying compare these numbers.
Perfect.
That's a great.
My colleague asked for bilingual. Where would that be in all of this as well?
So I think you're saying we don't want just the big number in the outcome. We want to see some sub numbers in the outcome. That's where it lives. And it's living in the target out there on the right-hand column.
So is that where the bilingual would be?
Growth in student.
It could. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Populations to
Right.
each other. There shouldn't be huge gaps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's perfect, and we just did the exercise, where does it best fit, right? So everybody immediately, when you said it, Ms. Rodriguez, I saw his, and I was like, yeah, just put the number out there, and we're saying it's important because it's right there in front of us. Okay, wait, say that, if you don't mind.
I just said that this
situation, like that feels good having these conversations.
I'm deaf in this ear, but somehow I heard her say that because they're chit-chatting, saying it, because this is why, Dr. Saunders, we are calibrating between the strategic team and the tactical team. The unspoken requests can never be met. So there's unspoken things that are happening, and we're speaking them, and we're calibrating. We want to get everybody on the same page, literally the same page, and that's why I think it feels good. I hope it feels good from the strategic role as well, because you're feeling like, okay, I've got a role in this.
Well, I'd like to get some input from my colleagues, just for taking a moment here and ask to go around if there's any comments. Ms. Eaton, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, I understand this, the way the setup is. It's just, and how we fit in, just those few concerns. But you sending, what you're going to send to Mr. Macias so that we can tie it in with superintendent's evaluation?
I'll just, yes, ma'am.
Tremendous help.
Okay, I'll give you some samples. I mean, these are districts that are a couple of years out ahead of you in this work, and they're making sure that it's all aligned.
Ms. Faulkner?
So I'm just looking, I understand what you're saying about the second column is where the superintendent's evaluation should live. We had in closed session a brief discussion about maybe some expectations and the thought of plugging those in. Would they be like subtopics of?
I think that's what I'm calling superintendent areas of focus.
It would be,
Okay,
what I heard was an extra listing on here that addresses board superintendent relationships and then going
Okay.
through those
Yeah,
expectations.
yeah, because I
that you
mean,
guys give.
I don't disagree with our conversation that Ms. Ryan brought forth. I don't disagree at all. But I think we talked about the possibility of it living somewhere in the evaluation.
Okay, I misheard, thank you. You heard, I think, what she said better than I did. So yeah, it's its own category. And that's what Dr. Fields just said.
Thank you.
Right,
Yeah.
we'll draft something together and make sure it incorporates what you're looking for.
Ms. Canoyer?
I think this is a great start. I know we have extremely intelligent people who are looking at all of these progress measures and the outcomes and where we'll be and what we need to fit under each of these. I really do like the strategic objectives. I think that does cover all of the areas that our board is particularly interested in. So I'm excited to see this move forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Stafford?
Let's see, I just wanted to clarify how we actually use the scorecard, what do we do with it and how often? And are we working on I'm a little unsure, if we're doing an add-on for the superintendent's goals? We're going to add that?
It's just
As a
one additional category at the end of this, board superintendent relations, but then all the rest of this is these are the expectations for the superintendent to ensure that this work is getting done.
So we're going to use the scorecard.
In column two is
Let me, do you ask two really good questions? And now I don't remember what the first one is, so let me answer the second one, and then let's go back
Okay.
to the first one. So we can do this any way you want to. In my evaluations towards the end of using a scorecard for 12 years, so I had column 1, column 2, I had those key strategic actions listed to remind the trustees, like this is what the district is working on. Instead of lead measures, I had significant outcomes from the previous year. That was kind of like the old way you used to do evaluations. But I was listing them lining up to the objectives instead of just bringing all this big PowerPoint with a bunch of pictures. And so like it forced me to think, what did we get done this year in 1.1? What did we get done this year in 1.2? And then I brought you the status of the outcome measures, the annual outcome measures. And that was it. And I asked the board, do you want to evaluate me on a score for 1.1, a separate score for 1.2, a separate score for 1.3, a separate score for 2.1? Or do you want to give me a score for priority one? All, you follow what I'm saying? Like everything that's in yellow on there? And then and that board laughed and said, least amount of numbers as possible. So that meant they're going to listen to what I say about 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, but then they're giving me a rating on all three of those combined. That's what they chose to do. We've got several districts right now that want to be a little more granular. We want to give a score, does that make sense, for 1.1, another score for 1.2, and another score.
So if we wanted to add a couple things, as Ms. Faulkner was saying, we would put them in, we would tack them on in another column?
Well, not column,
In another
rows.
row?
Yeah, it would be an additional
Oh,
set of rows.
Another row. Oh,
Yeah, that blank
you know.
space at the bottom of that would be those things, yes.
It was Miss Eaton. I just copied.
Well, right, and I'm going to send you a sample that's going to just show that fifth perspective down there, which is just board superintendent relations. It's not to be board adopted, not for scorecard to be cascaded. It's just for the team of
Our
A.
discussion.
Yeah, just for the team of A.
Right, and then where would board goals live?
I thank you for asking that, and I think that's a third question you just asked, and I still don't remember what the first one was, but it was a good one. I'm proposing that the board's goals are column 2.
Same as,
Board goals, superintendent goals, district goals. Why do
All
we
the
need,
same.
why do we need 10 sets of goals?
okay? Well, we don't,
What?
I just,
What? No, that was a rhetorical question, but the part of the problem right now is districts have too many sets of different goals. Can we get them all
Get them aligned.
in one place? That's the only shot you have of these arrows aligning.
And that's why I like this, because
Simple.
that does that potentially. I'm sorry, Ms. Stanford, continue.
I think my first question was, how do we use the scorecard?
That's right, it was.
Yeah,
So as superintendent, the accountability of making a report to the board as a check-in, whatever that means, if it's a strategic roundtable or if it's just a monthly check-in, I leverage that. So if we were going to report on 1.1 and 1.2 in September, we were having a 1.1, 1.2 meeting in August, the month prior, where we were, doors closed, just, wait a minute, what? The number is what? So it was our cadence of accountability. So then, we would, in that meeting, be saying, okay, then we're going to show the board, like, we didn't move that thing at all. We thought we could get 2%, and we got 0.2%. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to tell them we got 0.2 rather than 2. Okay, so then it's this constant cycle where it's cabinet, next month, board. The same month that the cabinet is making a report to the board on that one, the cabinet is working on the next month behind the scenes. And it's what Covey calls a cadence of accountability. Now we have this cadence of accountability. Now, if you want to do strategic roundtables periodically, and by the way, 4 disciplines of execution, Covey, and that's where that stuff is. And 4DX, have y'all heard? Okay, this is 4DX. Like, that's what, like, you could take that book and just like, oh, okay, 4DX might be helpful on this, just to get your head wrapped around it. The next thought is, do you want to have these strategic roundtables where it's a little deeper dive? That, to me, is a question to the board that it doesn't have to be answered now.
Okay.
I think at
probably
least
in the
one of you do.
beginning, at some point.
I think at the end. I don't think at the beginning.
No, but I mean, in the beginning of our process, in the beginning, like, in the first year, for sure.
I'm going to move it on to Ms. Rodriguez. Provide some input.
I've said a lot, but I think I'm starting to get very interested in the shaping of like the last column. And I understand that this is an initial draft, but I think the ones that are jumping out to me where I'm like, I'd maybe want to know a little more than this or different things is on the student experience and well-being. That feels like a very narrow, like, I'm not saying don't include those things, but I would want to have a more holistic view of how students perceive the campus climate or, the district climate, things like that. And I think we have measures that do that. We have a panorama student survey, correct? Yes. So like a general roll-up of that would be something that I'd want to look at rather than a narrowing in on just safety. And then I think the ones on the finance and operations one, I think that I would love to see, like, this is great in like kind of like a brainstorming sense, I imagine. And I would say like I want to see numbers in there of some sort. I don't know what they look like yet. It's not a specific piece of.
I wish I would have said that before you said it, because I looked at this earlier, but I'm kind of joking about that, but I'm validating what you're saying. I think a lot of the key strategic actions here, and I think Dr. Fields might have alluded to this, is like build the tool that helps us have the measure along the way. So I had this same thought, like that. It's okay, right now it can be build the tool, but then I'm the most qualitative guy ever. Like I could do qualitative stuff. If you want to make progress, make it quantitative. So that's not my natural comfort zone, just so you know. But in 24 years of a superintendent, I saw when we moved the ball, it's because we put a number on it.
Yeah.
That's what, and then it got moved. And sometimes, like a survey data is qualitative data, but we're quantifying it. And when we quantify it, then okay, now we've got a target. I mean, we're Americans. You throw something on the floor and say, first one that gets a gummy bear, and half of everybody's going over or under the table. I mean, so we're competitive by nature, and assigning those numbers just brings that competitive spirit out in us.
And by no means am I saying like by the next meeting, we should have numbers here. That I understand that that's like a year-long process in some cases. So that's what I had. Thanks.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Ryan?
No, I want to go.
Two things. One, along kind of what Jenny was saying about, student experience. I'm not sure if I feel like I'm getting a great feel for the entire customer experience in terms of, do they like the product we offer?
Right.
Right? Like Bohannon's puts, go there and I look at their menu ahead of time, and that's why I want to go there, and I roll in and they'll be like, oh, the porterhouse. Oh, we don't have the porterhouse. The porterhouse. It's on the menu. All of those scallops. So we don't have those either. We roll into high schools and all of a sudden courses don't make schedules, right? Like it's just, examples of how are we getting people to choose Judson and what we're offering. That's more than just the customer satisfaction on, I go to Judson High School and the person at the front desk helps me, right? Or if I email the principal, I think we're missing a little bit of strategic competitive and how we're going to attack that a little bit on here. And then column 2, there's no verb. Like objectives have verbs in it. Like we're going to do something. I mean, like the specifics of how we're going to do it.
We purposefully did not perseverate on verbiage because we wanted to throw a topic out and just say, what does that mean to us?
Okay. So now we're going to go backwards eventually.
Yes.
And craft that into.
There's a statement. 1.1 is a statement. 1.2 is a statement. 1.3 is a statement.
Okay, it's got a verb in it. Okay, that's what I was missing. I'm like, what are we doing with growth and student achievement? What are we doing with student?
Well, okay.
Like I know the details of what he's doing. What is my big picture, the district doing for student experience and well-being?
Okay, so this is really a good. So you said I'm missing a verb. Okay, so if you notice, all of the key tactical actions start with verbs.
Yeah.
Okay. However, to your point, you could have like the post. If you're going to have a poster on the wall, it's going to be the belief, mission, and vision, the priorities, and the objectives. Like that's the thing. So it is important how 1.1 is written.
Yeah.
Because there might be an overview document where that lives alone.
Yeah.
I can't see a verb, a measure.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? And you're all, because that's really important. Like, it needs to capture the essence of what we're trying to accomplish if I can't see the stuff to the right. That's
Yeah.
really, that's
Like,
the,
those are just like the touchstone catchphrases.
that's right.
That we use in meetings when we shake hands and we talk to people out in the public.
That's
Like,
right.
those are the, what are you doing? You know, like you said,
Well, and
your
I-
board member who like all of a sudden was just rattling off like.
Oh, I told you that. Okay, yeah.
Those big things, like
Yeah.
I need my 10 major talking
Yep.
points that are big picture, not,
Yep.
I don't need to talk about every single one of their tactical moves that they're making. I need big one over the world, what Judson's doing, and it's
I
gotta
mean,
have some
and if-
verbs in it.
If I was, I get this picture in my mind of you at Metrocom Chamber, or whatever. If you're saying, well, at our last strategic roundtable, we were talking, about, I'm going to go, strategic roundtable? Yeah, once a month, we do a strategic roundtable where we calibrate as a board and a senior leader team. If I'm a community member and I hear that that's the way you're running the district, that is a lot more important than scallops versus porterhouse.
Yep.
Okay, right? Like, I'm hearing they have a system, like they've got a robust system.
Yep.
But that was good feedback.
That's all I got.
Well, I just heard to my left, I got it. So yeah.
So we have reached that 8:30 time, and I want to be actually just appreciative of people's time here. So just to clarify, I will try to schedule a meeting and have Betty Holmes contact my colleagues to see if we can schedule another meeting before the 16th of May. But we need to look at your calendar too.
Okay.
But just to set things up, what do we need to do in the interim to provide you additional information? Or talk to me a little bit about what those next steps will look like.
Yes, I'm leaving you with homework. No, here they come. Okay.
You know the kids are on the way out.
Here, these are two separate documents. Note that one of them says P1, Primer 1, and I've got them come in both directions. So these are purposefully handouts for reflection points for trustees when you're at this point. And so
Okay.
it's just like for you to think about, key questions for you to think about. To cabinet members, to answer the board president's question specifically,
Yeah.
you all, I'm assuming in the next 2 or 3 weeks, in the midst of everything else going on in school, are going to be digging in, and I see notes, I see notes, I see notes, I see notes. So is it fair to say, as they go home and they look at this draft of the scorecard, if they have a thought, get them to Dr. Fields? Yes. Is that fair enough? And I'll repeat that.
Yeah,
Because
Ms.
that-
Ryan, Ms. Rodriguez? Go ahead.
No, it's all good. It bears repeating. So it's not like ollie, ollie, all come free. If you didn't say it tonight, you can never say it again. Okay, like that's not, if you go home and you reflect and you think of something, I'm saying get them to Dr. Fields and Mr. Macias, because they're about to take these follow-up notes and get back in this thing and start kicking the tires on it and digging around. It's like, give feedback. These documents are really meant to just kind of cement this. What do I do right now? What are the big questions I can ask myself as a trustee? And then the second one on here is more of the conversation we already got to. How do we operationalize it, Ms. Stanford? I think that one of these primers is, what do we do once the thing's adopted? There's a whole primer for that.
Do we get feedback from Dr. Fields at some point into the goals? Do we see how
I-
feedback is?
He was very verbal at the first meeting I was at. He came to life when we started.
I would say that this is the feedback. We actually went through, determined what your priorities were, came up with the key tactical actions. I heard tonight a few other areas that could be added in. I heard that we could embed innovation. I heard we could embed bilingual, transportation, a little bit more with finance, but I think that a lot of finance may rest inside of board superintendent relationships. So I'd like to hammer that out as well, once we put all of that
gotcha.
together.
Yep.
Maybe put some more verbs
So that same concept.
in the strategic objectives. Then we just send it back to the board and then let you take a look at that. And you give some feedback on how we progress since then.
I think it's important, naturally, that this might be taking a little longer to get to, but it's extremely important that we set the right frame, and I feel confident that that is exactly what's happening. The foundation is being thoroughly built so that we can go forward for years on this.
And he's going to send me one tomorrow.
You'll be following up tomorrow, I guess? Yeah.
I'll send, yes, ma'am, it's on my tomorrow to-do list. That is the 24th of April, 2024. I'll put it on
Thank you,
tomorrow.
sir.
Yep.
Well, it is now 8:35. We're going to, before I say that, we do have self-evaluations. We'll talk more about that and send out some information about the self-evaluations for the board. But at 8:35,
What was the homework one more time?
Well, just those two
Just to read-
documents,
read the
just to read and reflect,
nerdy.
and if you have another thought,
Gotta do my own.
my gut feeling is this group that I'm surrounded by will be digging into this stuff soon, so if you want to get it in while they're working on this, get it in.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
all right. Dr. Saunders, did you have a comment? Oh, okay. Well, it is now 8:35. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Am I good?